It's transfer central today. We've got lots of transfer news to discuss, but it's also Mikel Arteta's press conference because Arsenal are back in Premier League action this weekend with a chance to respond and rebound from their Champions League exit against Bayern Munich in midweek. And we at TGT, we've got a very important job to do. This is the Arsenal News Show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another episode of what is the Arsenal News Show, joining you every single morning at 8 a.m. UK time. Thank you as always for joining me and making this a part of your morning routines. It is very much appreciated. I hope you've had a fantastic week so far. It's Friday, which is good for many reasons. It's good because it's the end of the week. It's good because it's New Music Day. I don't know if you know about this, but most new music does get released on a Friday. I mean, in the drum and bass world, at least, which is always a good thing. But I hope that you've had a really, really productive time and have been able to take your minds away from the disappointment of Tuesday. Was it Tuesday? I feel like it was Tuesday. Wednesday night. I think it was Wednesday night, wasn't it? I've tried to block it out. But good morning to those joining us in the chat box. Thank you so much, as always, for doing so. Let's jump into the chat. Damien, Amesy, Paul, Matt G. We got Jackie and Blackshine, Barry, Martin, Rancid, Stephen, Steve, Robert, Alpha, Kish, Damien, Gavin, Angela, Robert. We got Leon, Adagoke, and Rob and Kim. Thank you so much to all of you for tuning in. Now, I did mention that we've got a job to do because, as always, we like to give ourselves something of a 24-hour buffer. Now, on yesterday morning's show, in reaction to the Bayern Munich game, I said to you all, I understand, I get it. You've got to take a break sometimes. Sometimes you've got to take yourself away from the games. I do it, and I don't blame you for doing it. But if you are back today, and if you've caught up on yesterday's show, we are about 50 likes on that 1,000 mark on that video. And we've got 24 hours to save the challenge. You know, we need Arsenal to save their title challenge. Well, we need to save the 1K everyday like challenge. So you've got 24 hours. We've got to make sure that we get it. So if you've not yet dropped a like on yesterday's video, please make sure you go back to yesterday's show and do that. And if you haven't done so on this show, because we still need to address the 1K every day on this show, of course, as well, then please make sure you drop a like on the video. We need to keep this challenge going. It's important to me, and I hope to you. But if you could be so kind, I would appreciate it. Right, let's go to today's stories, shall we? We start with, well, the English coefficient in Europe is in tatters because the Europa League and UEFA Conference League took place last night. Aston Villa snuck through against Lille on penalties after some controversial decision-making, and Emi Martinez once again in the headlines. That man just loves a headline, doesn't he? Just absolutely loves a headline. But Villa sneaking through to the semi-finals of the UEFA Conference League. But in the Europa League, I mean, the worst Atalanta side in years, they said. An Atalanta side that has not had the prowess of previous seasons. They sold their best player, Rasmus Højlund, in the summer. This isn't an Atalanta side that used to be, you know, with the likes of Gomez getting to the Champions League and progressing to the knockout stage. This is arguably the worst Atalanta side in the best part of a century, tongue in cheek. But somehow they've knocked out a Liverpool side that are, you know, on a journey on their way to Jurgen Klopp glory. Well, they're out of the FA Cup. They're now out of Europe. They've got the league left. It's Carabao Cup. It's yeah, it's crazy to think what they were saying. Liverpool fans are so vocal, despite being 3-0 down after a first leg at Anfield. Goodness gracious me. Bayer Leverkusen knocking out West Ham. West Ham gave them a good run, but Jeremy Frimpong keeping that unbeaten run going. It's actually ridiculous at this stage what Bayer Leverkusen are doing. It's amazing. They'll take on Roma, and Atalanta will take on Marseille. We've got the chance for an all-Italian final, but there's that emotion. Remember that Liverpool fan with the emotional tweet, like, any Europa League final between Liverpool and Bayer Leverkusen would be something of kind of would it be even bigger than any potential Champions League lineup? Well, you got to be in it to win it, and they're not. Moving forwards, though, and into what is a transfer-heavy show this morning, KSE, Kroenke Sports Entertainment, Arsenal's ownership are said to recognise, according to a number of outlets actually yesterday, but the Guardian reporting this initially, saying that they recognise that Arteta still needs more investment, still needs to to sign more players, to strengthen the squads, and they're right. I'm glad that they've recognised this because we do need more. We do need some more players. We do need more investment in this team. We need to continue this building process of this squad in the summer. And it seems that the financial power of KSE is going to continue to back the club in the summer, which is a good thing. And there are a number of targets, of course, that Arsenal are being linked to. Now, The Guardian continues. It's an article by Ed Aarons who said that Alexander Isak is indeed one of the striker targets that Arsenal are said to be considering ahead of this summer transfer window. Now, it's not guaranteed, of course, that Arsenal will end up getting Alexander Isak, just that he is one of the potential options that they are looking at. Newcastle are said not to be keen on signing the player at all, and there's absolutely no suggestions that the profit and sustainability issues that surrounds Newcastle will be changing this whatsoever. And because of that, I still don't see a world in which Alexander Isak comes to Arsenal. We'd have to stump up a huge amount of money for that to happen. I hope that it does. Of course, I'd love Alexander Isak to be Arsenal's summer signing. But for this moving forwards, we need to make sure that we are signing the right players. And I just look at him as being one of those potential targets. The Guardian continues in its article, suggests that Mikel Olise is also said to be of interest. Olise is an interesting profile. He's been a fantastic player for Crystal Palace. He does have something of an injury record, which is of concern. But from my perspective, if Arsenal are going to go for a winger, a wide player, I want them to go for a significantly pacey, running behind, pace merchant, basically, and I don't see Olise as that type of player. He's more technical. He's the type to kind of cut inside and be creative. And I think Arsenal need like a proper winger. Your Nico Williams of the worlds. It's, a player like him, I think, would suit Arsenal down to the ground. So I think that would be an excellent addition. But Olise is still a fantastic player, but I'm not sure if he's the profile of wide player that Arsenal should be looking to try and sign in the coming summer months. But Olise is said to be of interest to the club still. And the last target to talk about is, according to Daily Mail, another player on that list of strikers is Benjamin Sesko, the Slovenian centre-forward playing currently for RB Leipzig. He's had a very good season so far, and he's continued his rise in the RB Leipzig team. He started the season very much on the bench for Leipzig, but has gradually and continually improved kind of his role in the side and has begun to start a lot more games. And now he's got 13 goals this season, 2 assists as well. But if you count the number of games that he's played in recent times, which I'm looking at his record as we speak, and he's got, I'm looking at this, 6 goals in the last 10 to 11 games, 2 assists in that period as well. And they've all been, bar 3 games, beg your pardon, starts. And those 3 games that he didn't start in were the games that he didn't score in. So in the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 starts, he scored 6 goals and got 2 assists. So a goal contribution every single game of those last 8 starts for Sesko. Includes one against Bayern Munich, actually, as well, in a 2-1 defeat earlier on in the season. And he scored against Stuttgart, who had a very good season as well in the Bundesliga. So he's not averse from scoring against some very competitive sides either. So Benjamin Sesko, still said to be one of those targets. I reported on Football.London a fair few weeks ago now that Arsenal weren't looking at the older profile of centre-forwards, and instead it was those younger strikers that they were looking at for the summer. And it seems that turns out to be the profile indeed. I'll come to that in a second. But Mikel Arteta and his press conference is going to be today. We'll be hearing from the Arsenal manager ahead of this weekend against Wolves. I expect him to be asked about how the players have kind of responded from the disappointment of Wednesday night. I expect to get some updates on how the team has recovered from that game, how fit the players are. We've literally had 2 days. You've had Thursday, you've got today, and then you've got Wolves. Wolves have had, obviously, a week off ahead of the game. Arsenal will be expected to run around again on a Saturday afternoon. And it's just crazy, the schedule for Arsenal right now. And it's not going to get any easier because we've got Chelsea on Tuesday. And then we've got, of course, Spurs at the weekend as well. So much going on, so much football to be played. And Arteta needs to be rotating. For me, he needs to rotate heavily against Wolves on the weekend. I wouldn't start Saka. I wouldn't start Ødegaard. I wouldn't start Rice. I'd be playing the likes of Jesus on the right, Trossard probably through the middle, and Nelson on the left-hand side. I'd probably potentially even rest Havertz. I think we need to rotate quite significantly, so we can give players a rest ahead of Chelsea and Spurs. I know you might say that, we still got to beat Wolves, and we do, but we should be able to beat Wolves with the depth that we're bringing in, because I just don't think that if we do rotate, if we don't rotate against Wolves, I just don't give us much of a hope to keep up the energy going into games against Chelsea and Spurs as well. But Mikel Arteta's press conference is early this afternoon, so you'll be able to watch, of course, that on Catch Up. You can follow the live blog on the Football.London website as well. But very interested to hear what Mikel Arteta has got to say after what has been a very tricky last 7 days. Now, the prize has now expired for the Martin Odegaard shirt. Best of luck to all of those that have got involved with that latest competition, courtesy of Football Prizes, who continue to support and sponsor the channel. Taking a second to thank them for their kind support of the channel. There'll be more prizes to come on the website, always continually updating the potential competitions that are there. I recommend you go and check out the website down in the link in the description to have a look at some prizes that are, of course, on offer. But if you were involved in the latest competition to win a potentially, you get to pick of all of those prizes you can see on the screen if you entered it. But if you are successful, you could, as an Arsenal fan, I'd imagine, pick the Odegaard shirt. There is a Van Persie shirt there, but I mean, come on, let's be sensible. Right, let's go to part 2 and your questions right after this. Okay, jumping into the chat box then, to tackle some of your thoughts and your queries. I should say, if you haven't done so already, please do drop a like on today's video. And as I mentioned at the start of the show, we were just shy on yesterday's show of reaching that 1K everyday target. We give ourselves a 24-hour buffer, but hopefully we'll all turn up in force, emboldened and reinvigorated after a day away from the action yesterday. Looking ahead to the final 6 games of Arsenal's season. We've got Wolves, Chelsea, Spurs, Bournemouth, Man United and Everton. That's it. That is all that remains. That is all that separates Arsenal between now and what could be, if Man City slip up. I still think we'll have to win all of our games to have any hope of winning the title. But we've got to hope that Manchester City in some way also end up slipping up too. Lee says, Tom, how is Mika Bieref still performing? Is he still banging in the goals? Could he save us some money? I mean, it's gone quite quiet on the Bieref front. I mean, throughout the start of the year, in January and February at least, there was loads of chat, wasn't there, about Mika Bieref? Of course, they got knocked out of the UEFA Conference League by Lille, who, of course, just got knocked out by Aston Villa. So having a quick look at his recent record for Sturm Graz. He got an assist in his last game. They play actually tonight against Rapid Vienna in quite a big game in the Austrian League. But he got an assist in a 3-1 win over Hartberg. He hadn't got involved in any of the previous 2 games. He didn't score in the 1-0 defeat in the title race to Salzburg. But the game before that against Klagenfurt, he got a couple of goals for Sturm Graz as well. Playing in the Austrian Cup, he actually played on the 4th of April in the semi-finals, and they beat Salzburg in the Austrian Cup, and he got assist in that game. They won 4-3. Also another impressive performance, it seems, there. And then in Europe, as I mentioned, they did get knocked out, but he did score in the 1-1 draw away in Lille, quite impressively so, but that was midway through March. So that's the latest on Mika Bieref, but I still don't see a future necessarily for him at Arsenal. I think that he is, though, potentially available for a much higher fee than we previously thought that we would get. Omar says, if we do heavily rotate and lose against Wolves, don't you think that the fans will turn on Arteta? What do you mean, don't you think the fans will turn on Arteta? Omar, I think at this stage, anyone who hasn't turned on Arteta isn't going to turn. I think we're at a stage where if people have turned on Arteta, A, I don't think you're ever going to give him a chance. B, I think they were always against him. I think all the people that are against Arteta, I don't think any of them changed their minds in the last 2 weeks. I really don't. I think anyone that's been saying Arteta out after Bayern have basically been waiting to say it. I think Mark Goldbridge actually, who's varied in his footballing acumen at times, but he actually did a really good video talking about Arsenal and talking about the state of Arteta out and that kind of level. And I thought it was actually a very well-spoken monologue. There was also a tweet yesterday that I wanted to bring to your attention, actually, because Let me find it because it was very, very good indeed. It was from Elliot Richardson. You may have read this yesterday, but it was a very sensible post, and I wanted to bring it to your attention. Elliot Richardson, who is a vice chairman and advisory board member of One Football, and he tweeted saying, "I'm going to write about something about Arsenal to make everyone feel a bit better this morning. I work with every major club, and many of the top ones are shareholders in my business. Right now, Arsenal on and off the field, and the project we are building is the envy of world football. Agents are calling constantly to get their players into the club because every player wants to play for us. The brand's wanting to work with us. Club is working on ideas to help the fans more and to get more of us to see the team that we love. Arsenal are feared, and that is why you see the nonsense in media this country. It's great. The owners are super committed and long-term investors and are not scared to invest for the long term. As for Mikel and the team and all of the staff, wow, this hurts right now, and nothing is given in life or football. But we are on a path that will mean games like last night on Wednesday against Bayern Munich and how we are performing over the last 2 seasons will become just normal. I have never seen more excitement about where we're going. Enjoy it. It's going to be fun. Plus, win at Wolves on Saturday, and you never know. Walk tall today. Our club oozes class, and let's stick together." And this is what I mean when we're talking about kind of the Arteta outside of things. There's 2 ends of the spectrum. There's your toxic part Arteta-ins that just literally think Arteta could do no wrong. You can't criticize Arteta at all. Would never want to be part of that crowd because, quite frankly, the idea of never being able to be critical is certainly not something I'm keen on. And then on the other end of the spectrum is your vehemently abusive Arteta outside of things, which is, I think speaks for itself. And thankfully, we sit somewhere in the middle where we can talk objectively about where we are with Arteta, and we can talk about and we can criticize when we need to criticize. And I think that Arteta has definitely made mistakes. And I think that there were mistakes made against Villa as the reason why we didn't win that game. And ultimately, I think the players made some significant mistakes and didn't approach the game in the second half, in particular, against Bayern in the best way either. We need to rotate better. Arteta needs to learn to improve his in-game management, as we've talked about, so that in games like Lens and in games like Sheffield United, and West Ham as well, that we're making changes better so we can protect the players and give them greater rest and recovery periods. But if you are Arteta out right now, it's because you've always been Arteta out for a very, very long time. I cannot believe that this season or last season there is any evidence to suggest why anybody would change their mind from before that. It has always been there, and I think that's it. So, yeah, I don't think, Omar, you'll be seeing anybody change. I don't think you'll see anybody change their view to Arteta out, because if in the last 2 seasons you've changed your mind to Arteta out, there's absolutely no understanding for that at all. Let's go to Ben, who says, "Do you think Arteta changes his tactics now that it's been figured out, or do we persist like in the past?" I think Arteta's changed his tactics on numerous occasions already throughout the course of the season. I mean, look how we went to Manchester City and how we approached that game compared to, say, the other games that we played over the course of this season as well. There's different types of tactics, and I think that if you rewatch games, you see the differences between them as well. Rewatching games is one of the best things that you can do. I know it's not always the easiest, and also it takes up a lot of time to do that, but it does give you a better perspective and understanding about how Arsenal approach games differently from one to the next. So we change our tactics a lot. Ishan says, "Hey, Tom, your thoughts on the list of players that we need to offload in the summer?" We love doing these little things. I think that it may have changed ever so slightly. Ramsdale, definitely, obviously, needs to be moved on. He's a financial asset that doesn't need to sit on the bench. We need to move him on. David Raya is an interesting one, whether or not we sign him permanently in the summer. I know we had a bit of a talk about Raya on yesterday's show. I think if Arsenal can go and get a better, I mean, if you told me Arsenal were going into the market and getting Diogo Costa from Porto, I'd be like, that's fine. Brentford, you can keep Raya. We're going to go get Diogo Costa because I think he is a better goalkeeper. Yeah, there's definitely scope still for Raya to improve. Into the defensive areas, I think obviously Cedric's going to be leaving. Zinchenko's an interesting one for the summer. Definitely one to look out for. His future is not assured. He's got 2 years left in his contract. Arsenal don't tend to like to let players go beyond 2 years unless they extend them. So he's one to look out for. In the midfield, Smith Rowe, Partey, Vieira potentially be open to selling as well. Nenny's going to be leaving on a free. Into the forward line, Reece Nelson, of course, and Ketia, of course, definitely players that probably should be moved on. And then you've got Kieran Tierney, Tavares, and Lokonga, of course, as well, coming back from loan. They will need to be sold as well. So there's a lot of players. Mika Biereth, of course, could get us some money. also, which is important. Ashish says, Tom, what do you think our budget should be and which position should we focus on? It's impossible for me to know, Ashish, what the budget would be because the budget will be inferred upon how much we sell, where we finish in the table, of course, as well. Arsenal did get a lot of money for reaching the Champions League quarterfinals, of course, which is going to be a big benefit to us in the summer as well. But there's still some things to be worked out, and we still don't know whether or not the sales are there. Ghostbella says, Tom, I want Arteta to prove me wrong. I don't want to be right, but if at the end of the season he doesn't win anything, I'm sorry, he needs to go. I think you're mad, but we've disagreed on this before. Robert says, my pal spoke with an Arsenal employee at the airport yesterday and said Mikel realises that we're still a little bit short, and we will be looking to sign some top players in the summer. If true, completely unsurprising. Of course, we want to sign some players in the summer. That is definitely the aim. Dan says 6 to 7 first team ready players are needed. They do that or close, then they're serious. If they don't, then we know they're not. Yeah. Name me the last time that Manchester City signed 6 to 7 first team starters in one season, because I don't think that they ever have done that ever. And I'm pretty sure they're a pretty serious team, and they've never signed 6 to 7 first team starting quality players in the summer. The reality is that's not going to happen for Arsenal. Arsenal aren't going to be able to add 6 to 7 players that can start for a title challenging team in the same season. If you look at last summer, City signed Gvardiol, Nunez, Doku, and Kovacic. Now, 3 of those are potential starters in Gvardiol, Doku, and Kovacic. Nunez, of course, has not been a guaranteed starter. The only time he's got minutes is because they've been willing to rotate him in. You go to the season before that, they signed Sergio Gomez, who barely ever comes anywhere near the starting lineup. Calvin Phillips, again, barely ever comes anywhere near the starting lineup. Haaland and Akanji, 2 starters, and Stefan Ortega, who became their number 2 goalkeeper. Season before that, they signed Jack Grealish and Julian Alvarez, 2 players, both potentially starters for them. Go to the season before that, they signed Ruben Diaz, Nathan Ake, Ferran Torres, and a lot of youngsters as well, none of who have played any meaningful minutes. But again, just 3 players. Torres came in and did start games. Ake came in, did start games. Diaz, of course, is a guaranteed starter these days. Go back to 1920, they signed Rodri and Joao Cancelo. And that was it. They signed a few other young players, didn't get minutes for them, just 2 players there. Go to the season before that, Riyad Mahrez was the only player that came in as a starter for the first team during that summer. Season before that, Benjamin Mendy, Kyle Walker, Bernardo Silva, Edison, Danilo were the players that they brought in. Danilo, of course, was depth, that right back option with Kyle Walker brought in. That was, I think, was that his first? It's his first main summer window, wasn't it? As manager Pep, he came in 2016 and brought in John Stones and Leroy Sané as well. Gundogan joined that summer as well. So that's 3. Nolito was a bit of depth that summer as well. 4 in January, they brought in Gabriel Jesus. So the max they've ever done is like 4. The max number of players they've ever signed that are potential starters, Man City, are 4 players, because teams just don't go out there and sign 6 to 7 starting players in a summer transfer window. It just doesn't happen. I can see Arsenal going out and signing 3 to 4, and we've done that on numerous occasions. You know, we've even signed 5 in one season. We signed Ben White. We signed Ben White, who starts games, Ramsdale, who starts games, Tomiyasu, who starts games, Odegaard, who starts games, and Lokonga came in and did start a fair few games. That was 4 to nearly 5 players, because when Partey was injured, Lokonga did tend to come in, but of course has since gone on loan. But yeah, the idea that we know they're not serious if they don't sign a number of players that have never, ever been signed by a title challenging team, to suggest that Arsenal aren't serious if they don't do that, nah, it just doesn't. It's just not true and or accurate or anywhere near the world of realism either. Russ says transfers depend on outgoings as well. I can't see many teams banging on the door down fringe players like Eddie and Nelson. I agree, and it is going to be obviously a challenge to find buyers for certain players, but I'm hopeful that we will sell players in the summer. Absolutely. Chris says, hi, Tom. Who would be your left 8 preference? That's the box-to-box midfielder that could overlap potentially with Martinelli and that's physically strong as well. It's a really good question, and it's not an obvious answer. I like Yusuf Fofana. I've talked about him a number of times. He can play as DM. He can play as a box-to-box player. I think he's a fantastic option in midfield, and is already in the French national side as well. So he is certainly one that I like a lot. Other players in midfield around Europe? I mean, Douglas Luiz, of course, at Aston Villa is another player I like a lot of as well. So yeah. Meanie Genie says, we're laughing at Arsenal comparing the situation with City. Why are you laughing? I don't get why you're laughing. Isn't City where you want to be? Is City not the team that we want to emulate? Is City not the team that we want to challenge? Is City not the team that we want to beat? Why would we laugh at their transfer record. Their transfer and recruitment and squad building has led them to win how many of the last Premier League titles? Mini Gini is one of the people in the chat box, by the way, that has been very Arteta out and in sometimes abusive, of course, in that sense. And I think this is a great example here of showcasing the detachment from reality of some of them, because when they do detach from reality and say and leave comments like this, which expose how absent-minded they can be about what they're actually thinking, it's very telling. We're laughing. That was a comment there, laughing at comparing Arsenal to City, which is what we want to do because we want to emulate that. We want to achieve that. Imagine wanting Arteta out and then laughing at the side and their recruitment and their strategies and how they've got there when that's exactly what they want Arteta to do. I tried telling you before, you challenge them, you ask them questions, they crumble, they fall apart. They fall apart. Absolutely. It is kind of crazy. So Nicholas says, if you're going to sign 67 players at once in the first team, name 67 players you're taking out of the first team. Not happening. And it's a very good point. But what I would say is that obviously we want to sign starting quality players that will compete with the starting 11. So when we say starting quality, it doesn't mean guaranteed starters necessarily that will come straight into the first team. We're talking about starting quality players that can compete with existing players. So when we're looking at somebody to compete with Saka, we're looking for a striker that will potentially start. We're looking for a midfielder that will potentially start. I think we need to look at a defender that can come in and compete with the first team as well, potentially at centre-back, potentially on the left-hand side, and of course a goalkeeper that's going to push us as well and push Raya and not let him sit comfortably. We want to have competition, of course, in certain areas also. I think that if we're talking about 67, though, we are going to need another midfielder, because I think I would personally look at moving on Smith Rowe and Vieira, and therefore I think we need somebody to come in and compete and offer rotational options with Martin Ødegaard as well. So that's very, very true. Amira says, annoyingly, Vieira's done well this season whenever he's played at left 8, but Arteta persisted with Havertz for too long at the start and he got injured and now isn't getting many minutes. And Vieira's story is a difficult one. You know, it's a very, very difficult one. And I hope that we find the right end for Vieira's story at Arsenal. And if that means he's staying and we can, of course, integrate him, then great. But ultimately, it's going to be very, very difficult to do that. And with his injury records as well, it's tricky. Arnold says, Isak, Barella, Sane, and Grimaldo would be the four. Grimaldo's an interesting profile, but he's not really the left back that we play. He's very much a wing back option, isn't he? He plays, you know, they play in a back three with two wing backs and Frimpong and Grimaldo. Would he suit Arsenal's system? I don't know, but he's a brilliant player. Leroy Sané, again, there's question marks about his injury record. He's also 28 now. Is that the profile of winger that we're looking for? Is he going to want to come and, you know, compete with Saka? I think Arsenal will probably be looking for a younger player. Barella, there's always going to be the question marks about whether or not he transitions to the Premier League very well. You don't know, but he's still a very talented player. Isak, of course, difficult to get him out of Newcastle. And these are the challenges that we've got. Brennan says, Tom, I'm pro Arteta, but how do you compare him to other European coaches that have turned around teams and had success, such as Alonso, Amorim, and domestically Emery and Eddie Howe? I think it's so hard when we start comparing managers to one another in terms of what they do situationally, because clubs are different to each other, budgets are different, leagues are different. It's so hard to do that. I really can only judge Arteta on what he's done with Arsenal. The only real comparable option I've got to him is Emery and how he did with Arsenal, which was not particularly great, and left Arsenal in a bit of a state when ultimately he left, which had to then be rescued. So it's very hard to make those comparisons. Amorim is a very successful manager with Sporting in the league, of course, where three teams dominate. But he's done well to kind of really break the mold of Porto and Benfica at times, and he's helped improve a lot of players at Sporting that have since moved on from that club or have since been signed. He's a very good coach and developmental manager, so he compares quite well, I suppose, to Arteta in that sense. How, again, a good coach. I think he's exceeded many people's expectations at Newcastle, but has been backed heavily, of course, with investment. And then Alonso, it's difficult really sometimes with Alonso to understand the level of achievement, what he's done this season with Leverkusen, because in his first season, of course, it was a Europa League qualification. Second season, they've won the title and they could go unbeaten. It's then, I think, next season, he's going to stay at Leverkusen. So next season, we'll get a really good opportunity to see what Alonso's mettle is, I guess, in a second season after such a successful campaign. So that's going to be very intriguing to see how Alonso succeeds. And I guess we'll have a better view of him as a manager after this season as well. So Nicholas says, I'm just sick of people acting like this team is miles away. I love this team and feel invested and attached in a way that I haven't in decades. We're just a few players short, and the negativity is annoying. Unfortunately, Nicholas, there's always going to be negativity. You're always going to have trolls. You're always going to have, situations where people are looking for attention, people are looking to put people down, people are looking to undermine situations. Best thing you can do is ignore them, because as soon as you apply any reason or logic, their arguments crumble very quickly. Dan says Chelsea in 0405 signs Drogba, Carvalho, Robben, Cech, and Ferreira. That's 5 title-winning teams have done it. Didn't you say 6 or 7, Dan? I think your words were, if we sign 6 or 7, we're not serious. So, and you've given me as an example to prove that. You've given me 5. So I'm going to say to you, that's not good enough. I think Arsenal could potentially sign 5 players that are competitive with the first team squad, but that's not what you said in your original point. So I'd need 6 or 7, and I need an example of it where it's worked. Anna Simo says, last 2 games show we are a good team, but not fully there yet. Be it a lack of maturity, quality, ingenuity, leadership, or a will to win. How much do you think our culture of no trophies plays on the team? Culture of no trophies. I think that's the wrong word. It's just, we have won trophies under Arteta. We've got the FA Cup. We've gone through and won our couple of Community Shields, of course, along the way. We've picked up, which aren't major silverware, I admit, but, the FA Cup certainly is. So there's not a culture of no trophies. That isn't a culture in any way, shape, or form. The culture of Arsenal is to compete. We want to compete across all of them. We want to compete across as many of them as we can, and we've had to rotate in some of those games. I was having a conversation actually with someone this morning on social media that was saying about why, is there a question mark about the cup competitions? But we have rotated every single time we've been in those cup competitions. Even in the Europa League, we rotated for our knockout games, and that cost us because our depth hasn't been good enough. We went out to Sporting, we started Nelson, Saka didn't start. I don't think we started Ødegaard. I think we started Vieira in that game. And I'm not sure Ben White started that game either. I just think that, I just cannot see. I cannot see the idea of it being a culture of no trophies. I don't think that's the right way of putting it at all. I'd say that it's just, sadly, that's the way that the competitive football is. There's only a certain number of trophies that every team can win, and ultimately Arsenal aren't favourites for any of them at the start of the season. So they're always, if they're going to achieve something, have to overachieve to pick up that trophy. At the moment, hopefully that changes one day. Let's go to Tizer says, I think we need 2 forwards as a playmaker, winger, goalie, holding mid and left back, Frimpong, Dani Olmo, Gyökeres, Williams, Sesko as a minute. That's a big summer. CJ Dan says, no, I said 6 or 7 or close. Well, if you said close, fair enough, I'll hold my hands up. But 6 or 7, is a big push. A big push. But I think that 5, again, you don't tend to see teams sign 5, really. And the example I think you gave, what was that, 2004, 2005? And was that the first season of Abramovich's money in a world in which it was very different financially back then? So you've had to go back to 2004, for an example, which I think is also pretty darn telling. You probably, if you went back to Manchester, I reckon if you went back to Manchester City's first big investment season, it would be something similar, wouldn't it? Let's see if I've got the Man City history up. Was it the year they signed Aguero? One of their big summers. They signed a lot of big players. So in 2009, they signed Tevez, Adebayor, Lescott, Calatorre, of course, from Arsenal, Gareth Barry. And the season after that, they signed Dzeko, Toure, Balotelli, Silva, Kolarov, Milner, Jerome Boateng. That's a throwback, isn't it? And the season after that, they signed Aguero, Nasri, Stefan Savic for 12 million, Gael Clichy for 7 million. So they made some really interesting signings in those years, but for actually less amount of money. But I suppose contextually it was different back then. But again, that summer it was only 2 big signings, Aguero and Nasri. Clichy, I didn't think played some games. Savic, I don't necessarily remember how many games he played. The summer before that, I guess, is one of the better examples of where it can happen. Dzeko, Toure, Balotelli, David Silva, Kolarov, and Milner. That's 6. I suppose if we're looking for examples, there's one. I guess we've got that one big season as well. And it was City, of course, when they had that. Comparably, the money compared to that back then was obviously very, very different. So, but that's how far we have to go back. We're going back like more than a decade for an example of a team when they've been able to invest in 5-6 starters. And you also have to think about what the Man City team looked like back then. You know, if we think about Arsenal right now, City weren't competing necessarily, I don't think, for the title, were they? During those seasons. I think they did once they'd made those 6 extra ones. You know, I remember when they signed Robinho in 08, they weren't competing for the title that season. In 09-10, I mean, I don't think have we got the Premier League? Does the Premier League table go back on the website that far? I'll be interested to know when Man City honours. Let's have a look. Man City honours. They won the Premier League. Their first Premier League title was 2012? Yes, it was. So 2011-12 was when they won the title. So the 2011 summer was when they signed Aguero. So even after they signed, though, that crazy summer of signing 6 players that would arguably start for them in Dzeko, Toure, Balotelli, Silva, Kolarov, Milner, they still didn't win the league. They won the league the season after they'd added Aguero and Nasri to the team as well. So it's an interesting history lesson, but I think it provides context to where people's expectations are with what's realistically available for a summer, and also the fact that where Arsenal are right now, which is 2 points off the title, 2 points off the title leaders, the title chasing leaders at the moment. Yeah, it's very, very contextual, isn't it? Lee says, when we buy in the summer, I want us to buy early. None of this deadline day nonsense. Agreed. And to be fair, Lee, we've done pretty well at that recently. You know, Rice, if you think about the pre-seasons we've had, you know, Rice and Havertz and Timber, you know, played in pre-season. If we think to the season before that, Jesus, Zinchenko played in pre-season. So obviously we were signing players that were then involved in those pre-season tours. So we were doing our business early. You know, we weren't doing it on deadline day. So we've been pretty good at being proactive in the market as well. Amir, it's his first year back in the Champions League, second year competing for the Premier League. Some fans' expectations of this team is like when employers offer fresh grad jobs that require 5 years experience. That's a lovely example. Yeah, very good indeed. And you have to feel for graduates these days. What they go through is absolutely ridiculous. There's a YouTuber I've been watching recently. His name is I think it's Ben Askins on YouTube. He's a British guy who kind of like assesses people's WhatsApp messages about. Well, yeah, it's Ben Askins on YouTube. He's my current guilty pleasure of watching. It's very good. I'd recommend it. But it gives you kind of a state of what employers can be like in 2024. It's some fantastic content. Nicholas Granger says, Tom, who would be your dream midfield signing for Arsenal in the summer? Much love, come on, you Gooners. Dream midfield signing. I mean, you're looking at somebody that can that perfect box-to-box player. Who is that? I mean, Fede Valverde would be a brilliant player to have. I'd love Arsenal to have Fede Valverde, but I don't see that happening. Elsewhere, what other teams really at the top of the? I'm thinking about teams right really toward the top of tables. As I've talked about, you know, Yusuf Fofana I like a lot, but that's not a dream, unrealistic signing, is it? When you talk about dream signings, you're kind of talking about the best, really. So I'll have a think and I'll get back to you. People saying Frankie de Jong in the chat. He's not the best of seasons really for Barca necessarily. So I don't know if he would be the Frankie de Jong that we all remember really. David says, why do fans talk like the season is over? There are 6 games to go with a chance to win it. It's so frustrating that fans don't have perspective. It's a coping mechanism, David, for some, which you just have to kind of accept at the end of the day. Some people are different. You know, that's how they deal with things. That's how they cope with things. And they'd rather just say it's done because if, you know, expect disappointment and you'll never be disappointed, as the saying goes. So for some, it's a coping mechanism. I don't really know what the necessity is there to plaster that disappointment and that viewpoint all over social media. Maybe it's, again, further of that same coping mechanism to find more people that feel the same way as them. I don't know, but people are different. So you just have to accept it. Angela says, why are we even talking about 6 or 7 signings? Wouldn't profit and sustainability regulations preclude this? It's like we're going to get a lot of money. It's not like we're going to get a lot of money selling the likes of Lokonga and Vieira. Again, another fair point. The expectation to suggest we should sign close to 6 or 7 players of starting quality, which is going to set you back, you know, potentially upwards of £300 million. You know, it could do. And whether Arsenal could even do that because of profit and sustainability regulations is also a factor. And when we were talking about those Man City teams, and as Dan brought up that Chelsea team, that was a period when financial restrictions was just not a thing. It just didn't exist as well. Dan says we have to go back that far, as only Chelsea, City, and Liverpool have won the league over the last decade, and 2 are on the list, and the other had Edwards as well. I don't think it's necessarily Edwards. I think they just made some good signings. They had a very good manager as well, and obviously the league that they won, there's a little asterisk, I suppose, next to it. But you're going back that far as well, because there's also not the financial restrictions that exist these days too. Trevor says, if you are second in the league, why are people saying that it's done until the day when it's mathematically not? I'm trying to work out, Trevor. I think you missed out some words in your typing, but why are people saying that's it? I get it. Because, as I said, it's a coping mechanism for some. That's how some people deal with it. Pessimism, optimism. I could never be pessimistic. I couldn't live my life that way. You only get one. I'd rather be optimistic and live life that way. Darren says, Tom, with the positions needed to be filled next summer, how many midfielders can Arsenal sign, if and when? The likes of El Neni, Partey, and Jorginho that could leave. I'd expect one of Partey and Jorginho probably to stay. I'd be surprised if both went, but I was surprised that both, Xhaka's gone as well. I was surprised that we did let Xhaka go as well, so to some degree. So you could always be surprised by what Arsenal end up doing in the market. I think obviously midfield is a big priority, so is the wide area, so is centre forward also. Ty says, come on, Tom. Surely Arsenal have a few hotels and American clubs we can sell players to for inflated prices to boost our transfer kitty. Winky face. DA says, doesn't this season feel like English teams have run out of steam earlier with all this added time and congested fixture list? It feels like teams are just hanging on. I would be intrigued to see how much extra added time there has been played this season compared to the last few seasons. Of course, since the World Cup, we've had this kind of emphasis on the idea of added time being extra. Has that added 2 or 3 more games onto the season over the course of it? I'd be very intrigued to see what the difference is there. Ashma says, Tom, you've always questioned people talking about Arsenal's mentality. How do you explain results in April 22, 23, 24? Also citing December 2023, February 2023, when we're losing one game and then we maybe draw the next 2 or 3. Again, it's mentality. I talk about winning. I question when people talk about Arsenal's winning mentality. So it's important to quote me correctly, first of all. But when people say Arsenal don't have a winning mentality, I'm like, I don't get where that comes from. I don't know where that comes from. If you ever hear Arteta talk, if you ever hear any of the Arsenal players talk, these are people that have got a winning mentality. The experience, of course, of dealing with title races and dealing with the Champions League is a very different thing. And other teams that we come up against will have greater experience, of course. Manchester City have got the experience of winning things. Bayern Munich got the experience of progressing year on year in the Champions League, and of course have won it on numerous occasions, and have got plenty of players that have won it in their squad also compared to us. We have Havertz and we have Jorginho, which a lot of Arsenal fans ironically have battered for most of this season. But it's never been the mentality. It's about the accusations that Arsenal don't have a winning mentality. That's the issue that I take, because that's ridiculous if you just listen to Arteta or the players speak. They've clearly got a winning mentality. This is a side, by the way, that have lost one league game in 2024. I wouldn't necessarily say that's a side with a questionable winning mentality. Sadiq says, we are still in the title. Some supporters have flimsy mentalities themselves, but they expect the players to have an elite, resilient mentality. Stick with the manager and the squad. I never liked imprinting kind of fan mentality onto the players. What I do like imprinting sometimes is the irony around the ticket system and how there's a basis xenophobia of fans that would only like to see local fans and loyal is the word, loyal fans in the stadium, despite the fact that they're more than happy to not have local players playing in the majority of their 25-man squad. Let's go to Tyres, who says, hi, Tom, on a serious note, do you believe whoever comes in needs to be a blend of experience and youth rather than all youth? I think that Arsenal need to find players of experience. You can find younger players with experience. Ødegaard is a great example. Declan Rice is another great example. Players with huge amounts of experience, of course, of games they've played for different clubs or at the top level, despite still being in their early to mid-20s. But I think, yes, that's why I'd love to see Joshua Kimmich join Arsenal. I think that would be an absolutely brilliant addition to the squad and a great example of the experience that you do need to try and sign going forwards. Someone said, oh, here we go. Have you got your bingo cards out, people? It's James. Mate, you're paid by Arsenal. Just going to need to go on. Got my bingo card right here. Someone put in standards quick. I had that down this morning. Your Arsenal's lawyer. It's another good one. Paid by Arsenal. Tick. Right. Bingo cards there. Thank you, James. That's another one for the morning. I should probably do it, shouldn't I? I should probably actually. This is obviously just a skit, but it's obviously a skit. But I should definitely do one of those bingo cards in the morning and see if we get the little trolls in the chat box joining us and filling it out for us. Pratika says people should listen to the lyrics of the song "Whatever the Weather" isn't just a reference to the weather. TJR says, which Chelsea's write-off are Arsenal going to sign in the off-season? Is it going to be Gallagher? Is it going to be Kepa? Which Chelsea player will we sign this season? Marcus says, you always defend the manager, but you are lying to your followers by saying that everything is okay. But anybody that thinks otherwise, you criticize. Marcus, I don't think that's true. I don't think I've said everything is okay. I think in this very show, if you go back and listen, I said that the in-game management needs to improve. I said there's been games this season where tactically we've not been good enough. We could have made rotational changes. There's been games this season where we should have used the youth more than we have. We made late substitutions against Aston Villa. Arteta definitely should have subbed off Zinchenko earlier in that game. Against Sheffield United, we should have been bringing players off at half-time. We should have done the same thing against West Ham as well. It's the case of when you say everything is okay, no, there are things that need to be improved, Marcus. Things need to be improved. So the only person lying is you. Anna Seymour is saying, that's why I don't get all the flack for Spurs when we're not that far behind Manchester City and that lot. Love what Arteta has done and would still want him to win for us for sure. Carl says, Tom, in the next press conference, would you ask Arteta? Bingo card. Yes, that's another good one. A very, very good one. This can't be right. It says, lol, Tom, apparently you're lying to us all. Please stop. I'm sorry. I can't stop lying to you. I just can't stop lying. Oh, dearie me. It's funny, isn't it? It's just the way it goes. Red Nine says, I saw Tom having lunch with the Cronky. Rancid, Tom, why are you lying to me? I'm sorry. I'll stop lying, I swear. I really will. TJR says, lift the standards. Isn't it on there? Lift the standards is just a staple. That is an absolute staple. James says, answer me. Okay, James, what did you say? Let me see if I can find. All your other comment was, mate, you're paid by Arsenal. I did answer you. I did answer you, mate. Trust me, I've said this before. I'm on record saying that it's certainly not something on my cards to work for Arsenal one day at all. Because if I did, you're absolutely. The irony is that you're right. You know, you can't criticize a brand you work for. You know, if you worked for, I don't know, Adidas, you know, and you started criticizing their designs, which I have done this season with the away kit on numerous occasions, you can't do that. And I enjoy doing this channel. I enjoy doing this. I enjoy being able to be grounded and objective and critical. And I couldn't do that. I couldn't do this channel if I worked for Arsenal. It wouldn't be allowed. I know that for a fact. I couldn't do this channel if I worked for Arsenal, you know? So there is absolutely no way that could ever happen. So it would not be allowed at all. That's why, you know, Charles Watson's his own channel. Is he paid by Arsenal, as some have suggested? No, of course he's not. People just don't really like the fact that some people have different opinions to them. And so they're contextualizing that to make that make sense in their brains. It must be because they're getting some dollar under the table. Rejectability says Tom is Arteta's cousin. Yes, it's the family links. We can't. I wish I had perfect hair like Arteta. That's why I wear a hat every morning that I don't. Damien says, wasn't you sitting next to the Kroenkes in Munich? Let's look past the fact that you wasn't there. I love this. This is great. It shows you again, this community is just fantastic. Adam says, hey, Tom, where do you think City will slip up now? I have optimism, but I need you to help me find it. Well, I think the 6 games they've got remaining, last season, they picked up, I think, 11 points out of 18. So, you know, they dropped points at Forest. Did they drop points against West Ham, maybe? And they dropped points potentially. Oh, they lost to Spurs, of course, as well. So, you know, there's a chance. There's a chance. Matchy says, blink if you're being made to say this. I'm not going to blink. I'm just going to try not to blink. I'm sorry. I will do my best. Harsh says, I am not too sure why people are after Arteta and Arsenal. We're still learning. We've had 2 good seasons and people are expecting we should be winning the Premier League and the Champions League as well. It's just a reality. Oh, I blinked. Oh, no, damn it. No, they know my secrets. But as I said before, like, some people just like to moan. Spectrums of personality. People are different. You know, if you've got thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people on a single topic, there's going to be a spectrum of views, you know. So It's always going to be like that. Gavin says, when was Tom's last rant? I think it was yesterday, wasn't it? James has apologised. Fair play. Usually you don't get people jumping into chat boxes and throwing in words like you're paid by the club, and then turning around and listening to what I've said and apologising. So you know what, James? I hold my hands up to you. Fair play. You're a bigger person than a lot of other people. That is for sure. Let's go to Leon says Brighton away and Spurs maybe. Unfortunately, I can see us dropping more points. Hopefully we can be. And that's the thing, is like we're looking at City, aren't we? We're thinking, can City drop points? But actually, we're looking at ourselves, because as we've talked about and as we have criticised, we've not been good enough rotationally. We've not rotated players effectively enough, and that means that we're tired at this end of the season. And so that's why we need to rest players against Wolves, which is going to increase the chance that we don't win that game. It's a very hard balance, really, really hard. Nicholas says, I'm taking a step back. Isn't it amazing to know that whoever it is we're going to sign, it will be an amazing player that will improve the team and wear the jersey playing for the team next season? That's where we've raised ourselves to, Nick. It's where we've raised ourselves to a position where now when we sign players, we're looking to sign the absolute best of the best, like Declan Rice, So, and I'm really excited for the summer. I can't wait to see what players we sign. Rejected Billionaire says, it's James from AFTV. It's definitely not. That's James B. This is James B's brother, James A. He's very jealous of James A. He was always picked first for everything. Tyser says, with all the great teams Pep has, he's only won the Champions League 3 times. Only. And how long did it take? I think the first point Tyser didn't really land, but I mean, of course, the second point about City, it taking them 7 years under Pep to win the Champions League. Arsenal have reached a position with Arteta at his first time of asking that they haven't done in 14 years. So it's very, very difficult. Lawrence says, although Arsenal might not win the league this season, but our progress under Arteta is the right direction, and we should stick with him for the next few years, and we'll get what we want. And look, Lawrence, I think the thing about Arsenal winning the league is that he has to under the next contract for me. Arteta's next contract, and he's earned that next contract in my mind because he's progressed us to a point where we're now competing with the best on the elite stages, and that's what I wanted us to do. But the next contract has to be about deliverance. The next contract has to be about the title. The next contract has to be about the Champions League. In a 3-year deal from the years of 2025, which I expected to be extended through until either 27 or 2028, we have to make sure we deliver a title, because otherwise then we will know that this is as far as we can go with Arteta. We don't know that yet. The last 2 seasons do not tell us that this is as far as Arsenal can go under Arteta, because A, we haven't had the squad. B, we've been punching above our weight. C, the injuries that have affected us have been significant. And we need to make sure that when we sign the players that we need to sign, because I mean, if you look at the comments, people saying we need to find 6 or 7 players. Some people are suggesting if people think we need to sign 6 or 7 players and yet are disappointed with the fact that we didn't win the league, do you see there's a bit of a contradiction there? That doesn't fit. That's putting 2 ends of a magnet at the same end against each other. You can't in one breath say Arsenal still needs 6 or 7 players, and in another breath say that it's a disappointment that Arsenal didn't win the league. How can a team that needs 6 or 7 starters or close to it should be winning the league? You see, it doesn't work. It doesn't fit together, and that's important. Ben says a phone-in show could be fun. Ben, I have done so many phone-ins in this week, and I've done 2, which is so many because I've done 2-hour plus shows this week, and I tell you what, it can drain you. I love hearing the views of people, I really do, but sitting and staring at a camera and talking to a microphone for 2.5 hours 2 times is no easy feat. On top of that, all the other shows that, of course, we've done this week as well. Speaking of which, I think we'll end the show there. Thank you to everybody that's contributed today, even the trolls, and helping us fill out our bingo cards. I might one day actually write one up and see how many we can do on a show, because that would be quite funny. But thank you ever so much for listening. Appreciate your time as always, and do drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you're new around here with those notifications turned on so you never miss a show. And yes, please to go back to yesterday's show. We've got 24 hours to save the 1K like everyday challenge. I understand after both Villa and Bayern, intrigue and interest has dipped. I get it. I understand it. I don't blame people for taking some breaks and taking some time outs. But if you could help us out, But we need to make sure that we're committed to that course. Thank you for listening. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy and respectful. And as always, up the Arsenal.